take over.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Das, for introduction. And today is a very interesting topic for our fellow colleagues. And as we all know, vaccine have been the biggest success of modern medicine. And vaccine obviously have altered the landscape of vaccine preventable and other infectious disease. However, the perception of risks associated with vaccines has limited the success of disease eradication measure. So today I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Rakesh Bhatia to talk on this topic, neurology complications following vaccination. Dr. Bhatia is an ex-professor of pediatrics of Agra Medical College. Currently, he's working as a senior consultant pediatrician in Pushpanjali Hospital in Agra. He has a special interest in the field of pediatric infectious disease and vaccinology, and has contributed the chapters of IAP textbook of vaccines and frequently asked questions on vaccine immunization. He is also a member of editorial of Journal of Indian Academy of Clinical Medicine. So without delay, may I welcome our learned Professor Dr. Bhatia for his deliberations. Dr. Bhatia, please. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shrestha. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be invited to speak on this important topic in the august presence of some of the stalwarts of pediatric neurology in the country, especially Professor Veena Kalra and Professor Dr. Satinder Raneja. It's also an honor for me to speak in the chairmanship of Dr. Lakshman Shrestha, head of the Department of Pediatrics at Tribhuvan University, Nepal. I'm also grateful to the office bearers of the AOCN to give me this opportunity to speak on this very relevant and very topical subject. I'll start sharing my screen. Good evening, friends. Vaccines have altered the infectious disease landscape. They are the most influential and the most effective public health interventions in the entire history of mankind. Millions of lives have been saved by vaccines, but concerns about their safety and efficacies have haunted us right from the days of Louis Pasteur. He was the one who invented the first human vaccine for rabies. But unfortunately, there were some neuroparalytic complications of the rabies vaccine, and this has come to haunt us even today. That was the beginning of the neurological complications of vaccines. Because of these concerns about vaccines and their safety, vaccine hesitancy has been on the rise in the West and also to some extent here. As a matter of fact, last year in 2019, WHO identified it as one of the top 10 threats to global health until COVID came and wiped out all the other threats and is now the only one rampaging through the world. But while it was there, that declining vaccination rates were threatening to destroy the herd immunity and have led to serious outbreaks of vaccine preventable diseases right across the world in developed as well as developing countries. Therefore, we should be aware of such rare but frightening adverse effects before we advise our patients regarding vaccination. Fortunately, the risk of serious events caused by current vaccine is relatively small. These adverse events may be caused by an active antigen in the vaccine, or maybe one of its constituents like adjuvants, or it may be merely coincidental. The problem is that most of us are not able to identify whether the relationship is coincidental or causative, because there are no distinguished clinico-pathological finding, and establishing an association extremely difficult. You can't conduct random and controlled trials. Most of the incriminating evidence comes from individual case reports, and therefore the only thing that we have to fall back upon is the well-controlled epidemiological studies, which are essential for proving causality. Before we go ahead, we must make that decision, and that decision is that are we talking about perfectly normal healthy children, or are we talking about children who are immune compromised, or children who have pre-existing neurological abnormalities, or maybe developmental disabilities. So they are different cups of tea altogether, and both have different kind of responses to vaccination. That has always to be considered. Broadly speaking, we can divide these neurological disorders we are going to witness with vaccination into two groups. On the one hand, we have demyelinating disorders like acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. There might be multiple sclerosis. There might be focal lesions like optic neuritis and transverse myelitis, and some of the most notorious complications like GBS. On the non-demyelinating disorder side, if you have encephalitis and encephalopathy, there may be rare conditions like subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. Residual seizure disorders are quite often seen. Uncommon are sensory neural deafness, neuropathies and mononeuropathies, and sometimes brachial neuritis. What is the pathophysiology of these neurological reactions? Autoreactive T cells are likely to play an important role, and there are two possible mechanisms here. There can be a molecular mimicry, or there can be cytokine induced activation. Suppose a peptide present in the vaccine has a molecular similarities to the antigens of the host, like myelin basic protein, then an autoimmune phenomenon may occur, and this molecular mimicry will lead to the pathophysiology of conditions like post-vaccinal encephalomyelitis. The other possibility is a cytokine-induced activation, and autoreactive T cells might be activated by these cytokines, which are released from the host cell after the virus-mediated cell death. These are some of the explanations which have been advanced to explain the pathophysiology. And one of the most dreaded complications is a post-vaccination encephalomyelitis. This condition usually occurs within 10 to 14 days of vaccination, and the range is 7 to 21 days. Early symptoms are headache, vomiting, drowsiness, and fever. As the disease progresses, there might be disorientation, confusion, coma, paralysis, urinary incontinence, and maybe seizures. The case fatality rate is tremendous. It might be as high as 50%. Death can occur suddenly, usually within 1 week of the onset. And even if they survive, the survivors have significant residual neurological deficits. One of the most notorious factors, one of the most notorious players in the field is acute idiopathic polyneuritis. We know popularly known as GBS. It's an acute polyradiculopathy, which is considered an autoimmune disorder. In 1976-77, there was an epidemic of influenza in the United States. It was feared that this could lead to a 1918 Spanish influenza-like epidemic across the world, and therefore President Gerald Ford at that time ordered a massive campaign to be launched to protect Americans from this dreaded disease. Unfortunately, what happened that one of the manufacturers used a faulty strain of the influenza virus, and this within 5 weeks of vaccination led to a condition resembling acute idiopathic polyneuritis. During that season, 58 people died from GBS. Out of these, almost 60% had received influenza vaccine within 5 to 6 weeks of the onset of the GBS. This resulted in suspension of the US National Influenza Program in that year, and the studies revealed that the incidence of GBS was 1 in 100,000 persons vaccinated with that particular type of vaccine. Intensive surveillance programs were mounted to study this potential link. Luckily, many subsequent studies did not reveal any statistically significant increased risk of GBS with other strains in the subsequent years. The surveillance continues. Today, it is estimated that there is a low risk of GBS after flu vaccination, and one could say approximately 2 extra cases per million vaccinations with the current vaccines available. Still, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which issues the guidelines for vaccination in the United States, recommends that flu vaccine should not be given to patients or persons who have prior history of GBS unless they are at great risk of influenza complications. Another notorious player is epilepsy. The fears about vaccination-induced epilepsy are also paramount in the minds of lay people. But of late, it has been realized that genetic and structural defects are the cause in most of these situations. In one of the important studies of 165 cases of seizures or encephalopathy, it was observed that a significant number had pre-existing neurological or neurodevelopmental abnormalities. Many of these patients who had chronic epilepsy had history which was consistent with genetically caused epilepsies such as Dravet syndrome or tuberous sclerosis, or maybe conditions like cerebral dysgenesis. This was an important observation which has refined our knowledge about association between epilepsy and vaccination. There are other conditions which can cause seizures at the time of vaccination, like epileptic encephalopathies and even benign epilepsy. For a long time, wholesale pertussis vaccines have been blamed for this kind of infantile encephalopathy. This was the term used in the past, in the last century. Although it has been refuted by many of these studies, but some of these fears still prevail. We'll be talking about pertussis vaccine a little later in the presentation. Because there is a large number of conditions which have been used for claiming compensation in such situations, there been specified in the National Childhood Vaccination Injury Act of USA very precisely the role of encephalopathy, how to specify it, and how to consider it for compensation. And acute encephalopathy is a condition which needs hospitalization. If you're talking about chronic encephalopathy, it has to persist for a period of at least 6 months. Then only it will be considered as a chronic encephalopathy. When you're talking about seizures or convulsions which are eligible for compensation, they consider myoclonic, GTCS, and partial seizures, both simple as well as complex. I'll remind you to note that absent seizures, jerking movements, and staring episodes do not qualify as seizures for this particular purpose for eligibility for compensation. Encephalitis after immunization has been noticed for a long time. In one study which spanned over a period of 20 years in the United States, 1,400 cases were noticed. And look at the distribution of the vaccines which have been responsible. At number 1 is hepatitis B vaccine with 25% contribution. Part of this might have been the plasma-derived vaccine. The others must have been the recombinant. Influenza and MMR both have been responsible for 15% cases each, and Hib vaccine has been responsible for almost 10% cases. One of the most common neurological adverse effects after vaccination, as all of us know, are febrile seizures. Matter of fact, we did a small survey in Agra Pediatrics Association, and most of our friends reported that they have seen at least 1, 2, or 3 cases of febrile seizures during their practice. And these were usually single seizures, and they usually settled down pretty quickly. Only 1 or 2 people have reported recurrent febrile seizures in their patients. 2 major vaccines which are responsible for febrile seizures are DPT and MMR. Of the DPT, the diphtheria component is usually not responsible for febrile seizures. It is the pertussis and the tetanus toxoid components which are responsible. As a matter of fact, when you look at the MMR vaccine, the risk for MMR induced febrile seizures in 1 per 4,000 cases, and unfortunately this risk becomes double when you use a combination of MMR vaccine with varicella vaccine. The risk becomes twice that of the MMR vaccine alone. And because of this, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices recommends that in a child who has a personal history of febrile seizures or has a family history of seizure, the first dose of vaccine should be MMR alone and not the combination of the MMR and varicella. On the other hand, no difference was observed when measles vaccine was used alone or MMR vaccine was used alone in the incidence of the febrile seizures. So you can use measles vaccine as we were using earlier, or MMR, which is the component of the National Immunization Program now, but one should avoid using a combination of MMR and varicella vaccine because it risk becomes double after using this combination. An uncommon complication is brachial neuritis. As a matter of fact, 15% of all cases of brachial neuritis occur following vaccination. It may be present on the same side of the vaccination, but sometimes it may also be on the opposite side to the vaccination. The latency ranges from few days to 4 weeks. It may present with deep, severe aching pain and might be followed by marked atrophy. The character of lesion is axonal, but there is no conduction block. The recovery is slow with regeneration and collateral reinnervation, and it may take 1 to 3 years for full recovery to be there. Now, this is the most important vaccine from the point of view of the neurological complications. And this story has 3 phases. This is the classical example that how important the childhood immunization are, how universally accepted they are, and how little is the public tolerance of the adverse effects. In the first stage, in 1974, Kulenkampff and his colleagues reported 22 children with mental retardation and epilepsy following whole-cell pertussis vaccination. Now, this report by Kulenkampff and his colleagues opened the floodgates. In 1975, the famous pediatric neurologist Aicardi and his colleagues described 20 cases of acute neurological complications within 7 days of vaccination. All of them had seizures. 5 also had status epilepticus. And they concluded that this clustering pointed towards immunization as the cause. This was the time when the entire cell, all components of the pertussis cell wall were blamed for this problem. In response to this, scientists developed acellular vaccines, assuming that the cell proteins as part of the cell wall were responsible, and it was observed that acellular vaccines reduce the complication, but they did not eliminate them completely. In the third phase, which was as recent as 2015, Verbeek and his colleagues in neurology analyzed retrospective data of children with Dravet syndrome and the pathogenic SCN1A gene. And they suggested that in children with mutation of this gene, pertussis vaccination could lead to present the neurological complication earlier than accepted. And they suggested that it was this gene which dictated the epilepsy problem. They defined seizures within 24 hours as vaccine associated, and they revealed that risk for vaccination associated seizures was significantly lower for the acellular vaccine as compared to whole cell pertussis vaccine. 9% for acellular and an amazing 37% for the whole cell pertussis vaccine. A very strange phenomena also occurs after the whole cell pertussis vaccination, and this is called HHE, or the hypotonic hyporesponsive episodes. This complication of whole cell pertussis vaccine is reported in 1 in 1750 vaccinees. It consists of seizures, irritability, alteration in consciousness, and hypotonia. One should exercise caution, especially if the seizures occur within 3 days of immunization. Caution should also be exercised if seizures occur within 3 days of immunization, or if inconsolable crying occurs lasting for more than 3 hours. And if this happens, pertussis vaccine should be avoided. So important was the problem with pertussis vaccination leading to neurological complications that Institute of Medicine in United States conducted a thorough and extensive study of the various complications of pertussis vaccine, and they decided, these were their conclusions. They said that evidence indicates causation, that is number one, and there was in this category febrile seizures and inconsolable crying. There was definite evidence for causation. In the second category, in the second line, evidence was consistent with causation, although that was not as strong. This was for acute encephalopathy and for HHE both. For other conditions like afebrile seizures, hypsarrhythmia, and infantile spasm, the evidence was not strong and did not indicate causation. For many other conditions for which pertussis vaccine was blamed, insufficient evidence was there to draw any conclusion, and these included epilepsy, GBS, aseptic meningitis, and peripheral neuropathy. Surprisingly, for autism, they said there was no evidence available either way. We'll talk about autism just after we are going to discuss the MMR vaccine, because that's a very important story. Another vaccine which is notorious for causing neurological complications is MMR. Surprisingly, we don't pay much attention to these aspects of the MMR vaccine. Febrile seizures, for almost as many as 5 cases per 10,000 vaccines, are there with MMR, and as we said, much more with MMR varicella combination. Cerebellar ataxia is another common problem which is of neurological origin after MMR vaccine. Neuritis, encephalitis, and deafness are other problems. Two peculiar conditions. One is that long name at the end of the list is ileocolonic lymphoid nodular hyperplasia, which you'll figure out in the story that we're going to talk about just now, and autism. These are part of the MMR autism story that we're going to discuss just now. A very important complication is the presence of measles inclusion body encephalitis. There were many well-confirmed cases, immune-compromised patients who developed this encephalitis, and in some of these patients, it was possible to demonstrate the presence of measles vaccine virus in the brains at autopsy. As we said, the febrile seizures are quite common. They are much more common after the first dose of the MMR vaccine. As a matter of fact, the second dose does not pose that kind of a risk. So most of the febrile seizures that occur in association with the MMR vaccine occur after the first dose. And this risk after the first dose is as much as 25 to 35 cases per 100,000 vaccines. Surprisingly, those who have had their first febrile seizure after MMR vaccine are more prone to recurrent seizure compared to those who did not receive MMR. And the combination of MMR with varicella further increases the risk, and therefore first immunization would be separate MMR vaccine and separate varicella vaccine. Now this is a story which definitely needs to be told. Autism and vaccination is one of the greatest myths about vaccines of all the time. The belief that MMR causes autism is so prevalent that we must talk about it. There are multiple theologies about this claim. One is the presence of a very strong anti-vaccine lobby. We don't have much of it here in India, although it is coming up. But in the developed countries, they are very strong. Another is the possibility of a poor distinction between the temporal association and the etiological association between autism and the vaccines. A notorious paper in the famous journal Lancet in 1998 claimed that MMR vaccine caused autistic enterocolitis. It created mass hysteria against vaccine, against vaccine components, and against thiomycin and against mercury. So much so that a book called Autism's False Prophets was written by one of the most renowned vaccine experts internationally, Dr. Paul Offit. Dr. Paul Offit is one of the co-authors of the Bible of the Vaccinologist, the textbook of vaccine called Plotkin's Vaccine. And in this book, Dr. Paul Offit talked about bad science and risky medicine. It was called the Lancet MMR Autism Fraud. In 1998, a gentleman, a general practitioner called Andrew Wakefield wrote a paper. It was published in Lancet, and he claimed that MMR vaccine caused autistic enterocolitis, leading to autism spectrum disorder. This opened the floodgates. It led to a dramatic fall in MMR vaccination in UK and resulted in a very significant increase in the infection rates from vaccine preventable diseases. So much was the mass hysteria and the atmosphere of fear at that time that even the Prime Minister Tony Blair was grilled by media, was constantly questioned whether his own son, who was 2 years old at that time, had received MMR vaccine or not. He never divulged it at that time, although later on in his autobiography, his wife, Cherie Blair, revealed that the son indeed had received the MMR vaccine. This was called a most damaging situation, but a journalist by the name of Brian Deer was very incredulous. He decided to investigate. He went into the records of the hospital, the Royal Free Hospital. He also went to the parents of the children who claimed that their children suffer from autism as a consequence of MMR. He interviewed them. He delivered many presentations on Channel 4 in United Kingdom, and he exposed this hoax. The records were falsified. The association between MMR and autism, which were claimed, were very remote or actually non-existent. General Medical Council of Britain called Dr. Andrew Wakefield. He was questioned for an inordinately long period of time. It was considered the longest trial of all time of this kind. And amongst this, finally this paper was retracted in 2010 by Lancet, 22 years afterwards. And its editor, the famous Richard Horton, admitted that this was utterly false and the journal had been completely deceived. It was called the most damaging medical hoax of the 20th century. It caused tremendous amount of damage to the vaccination programs all across the world. And it has not died down. As recently as 2016, the anti-vaccination lobby released a movie called Vaxxed, VAXXED, in which they again claimed that vaccines cause autism, especially MMR vaccine. So this story had to be told because of the damage which the anti-vaccine lobby has caused because of certain false claims and falsified records. Another important vaccine associated with neurological complications is influenza vaccine. In Switzerland, a new nasal influenza vaccine was introduced and 46 cases were reported soon after its introduction of Bell's palsy. The vaccine was subsequently withdrawn. Another flu vaccine revealed that there was a significant rise, almost a 7-fold increase in the risk of developing acute idiopathic polyneuritis, GBS. This was investigated, although subsequent studies revealed that this probably was due to C. jejuni antigen which was present in that vaccine. Multiple sclerosis was another association which was quoted for influenza vaccine. Many people claimed that this vaccine could cause a relapse of multiple sclerosis. And so deeply ingrained had become this fear in the mind of neurologists that even today they are hesitant in recommending the influenza vaccine for their multiple sclerosis patients. Although it is known that any febrile illness, especially influenza, may cause a relapse of multiple sclerosis, although there is no proven link or causality. But that fear persists. Another important association is with narcolepsy. Narcolepsy, as we know, is a chronic CNS disorder which causes daytime sleepiness, probably due to dysregulation of the hypothalamic neuropeptide called hypocretin. Pandemrix was the most popular vaccine in Europe, which was used for protection against 2009 influenza pandemic. This vaccine contained an immunostimulating adjuvant ASO3 that included squalene, vitamin A and thimerosal. This was 2009. After some time, in August 2010, reports of narcolepsy started appearing in children and adolescents in Europe. This was after the end of the vaccination campaign. And a Finnish study revealed that there was a 12 times increased risk for the development of narcolepsy in 4 to 19-year-old patients within 8 months of vaccination. Similar findings were reported for another Canadian vaccine, which was also using the same adjuvant ASO3. This association with narcolepsy was noticed for Pandemrix as well as for the Canadian vaccine. Another vaccine which is important from this point of view is hepatitis B vaccine. Earlier, an inactivated plasma-derived vaccine was being used where the neurological adverse effects were fairly common. This old vaccine induced a demyelinating process leading to optic neuritis, transverse myelitis, GBS-like syndrome, and transient inflammatory polyradiculopathy. Although this risk has gone down with new recombinant hepatitis B vaccines, but still some neurological complications have been reported with like cerebellar ataxia, like GBS, and myasthenia gravis. Multiple sclerosis has also figured out in this list, and this was observed in France. In France, when the vaccine, hepatitis B vaccine, was made mandatory for all the healthcare workers, it was observed that many of them developed multiple sclerosis. Although that causality was not proven, but that fear has still been lurking around. Another story, another very serious story about how rushing up vaccines, giving half-baked vaccines can lead to catastrophe. This time it was the year 1955. Poliomyelitis, paralytic poliomyelitis was rampant in the United States, and a vaccine was discovered. The president ordered that the mass vaccination campaigns should be launched with injectable poliovirus vaccine, which was available at that time. A large number of children, a huge number of children were vaccinated with injectable polio vaccine developed by Dr. Jonas Salk. And one of the manufacturers was Qatar Laboratories. Unfortunately, what happened that some lots of Salk vaccine, which was manufactured by Qatar Laboratory, were not properly inactivated. This allowed live poliovirus to creep into 100,000 doses. Children were injected with this contaminated vaccine and they developed paralysis. Paralysis was limited to the limb into which the vaccine was injected. It was withdrawn from the market. But by the time it was withdrawn from the market, 70,000 people, 70,000 children had developed muscular weakness. 250 of them were paralyzed for life and 10 children died. And this was because of improper inactivation allowing the live polio virus into these doses of vaccine. This story is important because today we are also in the same situation, and vaccines are being developed left, right, and center. And one doesn't know how rushed up this process is, how careful is the monitoring, and how careful is the supervision. Another problem with the polio vaccine is with the oral polio vaccine. As we know, oral polio vaccine is a live attenuated vaccine, and during its replication inside the body, the virus may become genetically altered, and then it is called the VDPV, the vaccine-derived poliovirus. Now, in an under-immunized population, these VDPVs start circulating in the community for a long period of time. And during this prolonged circulation in the community, these vaccine-derived polioviruses then start mutating. And over the course of 12 to 18 months, they might reacquire neurovirulence. It is then these viruses are called circulating VDPVs, the circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses. And today, these are the more common causes of poliomyelitis in the world than the wild poliomyelitis virus. So compared to the wild poliovirus, the circulating VDPVs have caused almost 1,000 cases of poliomyelitis. This is also an important consideration in the neurological complication of vaccination. There are certain other vaccines which are niche vaccines like rabies and yellow fever, which are neurotropic. And like we said, rabies vaccine was one of the earliest examples of the neurological complications of vaccination. The neuroparalytic syndrome, which was reported after administration of the live rabies virus vaccine developed by Louis Pasteur way back in 1889, was one of the earliest such situations with vaccinations. With the old sample vaccine that was being used, there was a high incidence of neurological complication, almost 1 case for 200 vaccines. And these complications included vaccine-induced encephalomyelitis, transverse myelitis, acute polyradicular neuropathy, and peripheral neuropathy. The myelin basic protein was considered responsible, probably because of the molecular mimicry. Although the newer vaccines are much safer, but minor neurological side effects are still seen with the newer rabies vaccines. Similarly, for the yellow fever vaccine, an important cause of vaccine-associated neurological complication, this vaccine-associated neurotropic disease is one of the most serious adverse effects, especially among young children. In one series of 23 vaccine-associated encephalitis cases, 16 occurred in children below the age of 9 months. And this disease can occur within 30 days after vaccination. The other complications of the yellow fever vaccine are meningoencephalitis, myelitis, edema, retrobulbar optic neuritis, seizures, cranial neuropathies, and of course, GBS. Another good vaccine which has suffered because of the fears in the mind of the people is HPV. And this has been a cause for the poor HPV uptake in the society. Some of the reported safety problems with this vaccine have been cerebral vasculitis, complex renal pain syndromes, and other autoimmune disorders. HPV L1 gene DNA fragments in the vaccine are suspected to lead to fatal cerebral vasculitis, although this was not proven by the studies conducted by the regulatory body. But this has received a lot of media attention, and this has led to poor uptake even in the developed countries of the HPV vaccine, despite it being a fairly effective vaccine. Bacterial vaccines are also responsible for some neurological complications, although they are uncommon. With Hib vaccine, you find rare cases of GBS. Meningococcal conjugate vaccine sometimes may cause GBS. One of these vaccines was causing 18 unconfirmed cases in 2005. Some cases have also been reported after the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, although causality has not been proven. Just a chart enumerating what we have just talked about. Measles vaccine has a lot of febrile seizures. Some measles encephalitis, pertussis has febrile seizures. Encephalopathy, oral polio vaccine can lead to paralytic poliomyelitis with wild poliovirus, but also with the vaccine-derived polioviruses. Tetanus toxoid can cause brachial plexus neuritis and sometimes GBS, and varicella can cause acute cerebralitis. And it's not only the vaccines, also some adjuvants which might be the culprits, especially aluminum salts which are added to the vaccine to improve the immune response. Because polysaccharide vaccines were poorly immunogenic, adjuvants like aluminum salts were added to them to make them more effective. They can not only cause local site reaction, but can also cause conditions like macrophagic myofasciitis, which has been considered as because of the aluminum in the vaccines. And encephalopathy, especially among preterm infants, has also been said to be possible, although this has not been proven. Aluminum adjuvanted anthrax vaccine can cause distal paresthesia. Thiomersal has received a lot of attention because the mercury present in it, which is a preservative for especially multi-dose vials of the vaccines, has been also blamed for many neurological adverse effects, although thiomersal has now been removed from practically all the vaccines because of this fear in the mind of the people. Since my brief was to talk about neurological complications of immunization, I've included the immunoglobulin therapy also in this, because this IVIG has been used now very widely, and this use is very rapidly increasing for both neurological as well as non-neurological disorders. And the neurological disorders include GBS, CIDP, multiple sclerosis, and autoimmune encephalitis. The neurological complication of IVIG therapy include headache, which is fairly common, aseptic meningitis, seizures, sixth nerve palsy, and PRES. More than 50% people develop headache after IVIG infusion, and is more commonly seen in those with history of migraine. This peculiar syndrome, posterior reversible encephalopathy syndrome, has been noticed, especially in patients of Miller-Fisher syndrome following IVIG infusion. And the clinical features are acute onset of headache, generalized seizure, visual impairment, and altered mental state. But it resolves completely when therapy is stopped. It should be considered whenever the clinical features suggestive of this. The role of regulatory bodies is extremely important, especially in the current scenario. And these are names of some of the regulatory bodies which look after the possibility of vaccine adverse effect and monitor them. The most important is one in the middle, the Vaccine Safety Data Link. Can we predict who is going to develop neurological complications because they are so severe? Unfortunately, it is not possible at this time, but future genetic research might be able to predict which patients will have neurological sequelae from vaccination. It is evident from some of these studies, like one with the Dravet syndrome, which suggests that those who have Dravet syndrome are more likely to have encephalitis and encephalopathy like conditions if they are exposed to certain vaccines. And similar concerns have also been explored about other vaccines. Therefore, one should be very cautious in asserting the etiological link unless it is proven by solid scientific research. And in today's scenario, the inevitable COVID-19. No webinar is complete unless COVID-19 has been mentioned. And the spotlight is on vaccine science as it has never been more intense. Today, the entire world is clamoring for a vaccine for COVID. Political compulsion, public pressure, all these have taken precedence over scientific method and scientific protocols. There's undue haste without extensive safeguards, and there is grave potential to cause harm, which can erode public trust in vaccination program, as we have seen with the Qatar catastrophe and also with the autism fraud. Previous efforts, let me remind you, at developing vaccines against other coronaviruses have not been successful. There's still no successful vaccine against viruses like SARS virus. The vaccines which have been developed against animal coronaviruses have had many neurological complications, and therefore one has to be careful when we launch the current coronavirus vaccine, because our desperation should not allow us to deliver the half-baked vaccines to a world which has already been devastated by the COVID-19 infection. So care has to be exercised. There are many vaccines in the pipeline. Many have been launched with undue haste, like in Russia, where their own scientists have withdrawn themselves from the vaccine protocols. So we have to be very careful with the COVID vaccines, or the entire world is looking forward to this particular vaccine. The current scenario demands that one should follow the protocols, one should follow the scientific rigor. Otherwise, we might land up with some problems, and it might be quite serious. The key points, once again, that serious neurological complications are rare. The important complications are headache, post-vaccination syncope, febrile seizures, encephalomyelitis, and polyneuritis, especially GBS. Unfortunately, many associations which have been suggested without sufficient objective data have not been able to establish a causality or a causal relationship. But the good thing is, most patients with such neurological complications recover fully. Poor outcomes are rare, but still, as physician, as pediatrician, as pediatric neurologist, we have to be careful about these possible complications, and especially with vaccines which are notorious for causing these, like wholesale purchases vaccine, like MMR vaccines, like influenza vaccines, and with hepatitis vaccines. We should be careful when we are giving this vaccination, or when we are analyzing the post-vaccine scenario where there might be associated neurological conditions, and one must give it a thought that this could be a vaccine-linked problem, although it's likely to be unusual, but it is definitely a possibility which should be entertained. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. It's been my pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rakesh Bhatia, for your extensive talk on neurology complication following vaccination. You have covered all the aspects of neurology in terms of vaccination, and from commonest to the rarest neurological condition like febrile seizures to various demyelinating and non-demyelinating diseases. And to summarize quickly what Professor Bhatia has covered off in the last 1 hour, I mean, neurological complications following vaccination are rare. Many associations have been asserted without objective data to support causal relationship. Rarely, children with neurological complications will have poor outcome. However, most patients recover fully from neurological complications. Neurological complications can be severe and can provoke fear in the potential vaccines. Evaluating whether there is a causal relation between neurological research and vaccination, not just temporal association, is critical to addressing public's misconception of risks of vaccination. Among the vaccinable today, the cost-benefit analysis of vaccination and complications strongly argues in favor of vaccination and preventing deaths of millions of children in this world. I once again thank Dr. Bhatia for his excellent talk. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our panelist, Dr. Satinder Aneja. He is the head of Department of Pediatrics at the Sarva University and a former HOD of Pediatric Neurology at Lady Hardinge Medical College, and then is also an expert in vaccine safety and chairperson of National AFA Committee. So I have the pleasure of introducing the panelists. Now I hand over my mic to Dr. Dipanshu Das, who is the moderator of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, would you like to speak something?
I'm audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so as a chairperson and as a causality assessment chairperson earlier, I have been looking at the whole data which comes throughout our country to see all the complications. And what you have told us covered all the complications, but by far the commonest one I would say is febrile seizures. The rest are very, very rare. Okay, so febrile seizure I would say is the most common. And of course, there are other things which will be there. So other thing is VAP, as you have said. So febrile seizure are, how do they cause? Vaccines cause seizure. Whichever vaccines can cause fever, and if they cause high fever in that susceptible age group, can cause febrile seizure. So febrile seizure can be triggered by fever due to vaccinations, and they are common. And The other thing is some things which we know definitely to be caused by vaccines are, for example, vaccine-associated poliomyelitis disease, aseptic meningitis. If you see after MMR, mumps was another strain of mumps virus was known to cause aseptic meningitis. If you see inclusion body, some encephalitis and measles after measles vaccination in a child who is immunocompromised, again, you will be able to diagnose. The causal association is quite plausible there. But by far, as you have said yourselves, for many of the other things, they are background events which are occurring in temporal association. And to make a causal association, you need to have background rates. So for example, how did they diagnose narcolepsy in Finland? Is because suddenly they saw a spurt. They knew they're getting, say, 50 cases per year, and suddenly you see 80 cases over some 6 months. You come to know in a place where you have a background rates. Unfortunately, in our countries, we don't have any background rates. So that is the reason why it is important to report to the system. So what you were telling me is the regulatory, it was actually adverse event. The regulatory, it is the safety data. So you have vaccine safety data link in some countries. In our country, you have a national AFI surveillance program. If we keep on reporting, you see all the data, and then now you get something else. For example, you are now getting another kind of a flu vaccine we start. And suddenly febrile seizures, we will know that febrile seizures were occurring at this rate. And then we see that the febrile seizure, the rate has increased. Then we can make out that this is increasing. They are not possible to do it at individual level. It is required to be done at a population level, a country level, or what they do in US is HMO levels. You have organizations. So for that, I would request, it's very important to have data. Unless we have data, there is very difficult to do causality associations. So temporal associations cannot always be linked to causality. And as you again said yourself, you can get GBS after natural influenza infection. You can get GBS after influenza vaccine. You can get ADEM after natural measles infection. And by far the chances of getting ADEM after measles vaccination is much, much lower as compared to measles natural infection. Same for, say, SSPE. Plausibly, it can be occur. But you see, as the measles immunization rates have increased, the SSPE also we see much less now. So the risk versus benefit is much towards vaccine rather than the complications. So we always calculate the risk versus benefit, and that is how the policy is decided. And very rightly said, what you said about Qatar and all incidents, now you have very tight regulations. Regulatory bodies, for example, in US, FDA, we have CDSCO in India. They have all these regulatory, tight regulations. But these regulations are as effective as the people running them. And for the vaccine safety, we as doctors have to keep our eyes open and to report all the incidents which we think could be. And then at a body, where a central body, you can decide whether these are a sudden upswing in some incidents. Then one can think, after we see some increase in some things, then you go back and maybe do hypothesis testing. For example, after start of pentavalent vaccine, there was a big hue and cry that there was an increase in sudden infant death syndrome. So there was a full-fledged population-based study done in Kerala and Tamil Nadu to see whether there was association, which proved that it was not there. Okay, so if we report something, then you can go back and look for any association. But my point is, what you have said is all very well, you have put it in a very nicely, in a comprehensive manner. But to the people who are listening, it is the natural infections which are more likely to give all these events more commonly as compared to the vaccines itself. And the risk versus benefit is still very much towards the vaccine rather than against the vaccines, I would say. At the same time, if we want the vaccines to remain safe, we must report all adverse events so that we have a good data to see whether they are linked to the vaccination or not. And that is our duty as doctors, besides, to keep a note of all these things, whether they are febrile seizures, whether there's ADEM, whether there is anything. We report it to the immunization program or the AFI surveillance program or to IAP, anything, whichever we do, or to the CDSCO. You have other ADR reporting centers. If you report it, then it gets collected in the system, and then the signal is generated, and then the regulatory bodies will also look into it. So I think we have to fulfill our duty also to report these things, even if you think they may not be related or related. Okay. So very rightly said. So you have talked, and there are some things which are definitely there. And the last slide which you showed, the risks, for example, for febrile seizures. So every pediatrician will report the febrile seizure due to DPT. But surprisingly, we are not getting any febrile seizures due to measles vaccine or MMR vaccines. That means we are missing it. Normally, you see more a higher risk for MMR, but we are not getting that reports. So that means our system is not capturing all these events. So this is what I want to say. So this is very important for us as doctors, as whether we are neurologists or pediatricians, we must report all the events that you see. Then only we can, get to know what are the things which are causally associated. Yeah, I think.
Most of the febrile seizure that we are saying are after the wholesale pertussis vaccine.
That is because the parents will link that to vaccine because it comes on the first day, whereas that might come on the 8th, 9th days.
Yes.
So it is not thought to be due to vaccination because it doesn't come the same day or the second day. It will come on the 9th day. Then people are going to forget about it. They are not going to link it with that.
Even doctors might forget.
Even doctors forget. Parents may not report.
Yes.
So I can't imagine that this can be possible because all countries have higher rates of febrile seizures after MMR.
Yes.
On the other hand, we are seeing only with, of course, we are doing wholesale DPT, but even practitioners who are doing acellular, they are not seeing any so much for MMR. So there is something wrong.
One possibility could be that MMR has become popular only recently, for last 1 or 2 years. Earlier, most people were using measles vaccine at 9 months.
So, but I am seeing, we are analyzing all the data, the countrywide data. We don't see it. Okay, yeah. We do see hypotonic, hyporesponsive. We see excessive inconsolable cry. We see all these events after DPT, and we see a lot of febrile seizures, but none after MMR.
I think wholesale DPT is our #1 culprit as far as the neurological problems are concerned.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is the most reactogenic vaccine.
Yes.
But having said that, influenza vaccine also might, if you give it to children, you might see febrile seizures. Even with pneumococcal conjugate, you can see febrile seizures. Any vaccine which can cause fever can give febrile seizures. But of course, DPT is the most reactogenic, no doubt. And in fact, countries which have switched to acellular, the AFI rates have drastically come down.
Definitely.
There's no doubt about that.
Especially the neurological complications have come down drastically. But another factor I would like to bring to your notice is that in the COVID scenario, MMR vaccine has been widely recommended and has been taken by many people. And also influenza vaccine has been very strongly recommended by many bodies. So one should be alert to the possibility because older people are now taking that vaccine, whereas younger children were earlier being given the vaccine. So this is also an important factor to bear in mind. And we should be alert to the possibility of a possible link in such a situation. And influenza vaccine also shares some similarity with the corona vaccines.
Yes.
So that kind of situation should be anticipated, at least looked for when we give mass vaccination with the COVID. So that kind of situation also must be remembered.
I will tell you that there is a task force which is looking into all this in India. I don't know about the neighboring countries, but in India we have a task force which is looking into right now, preparing for the challenges which are going to be seen with COVID vaccination, including the adverse events, including the events of special interest. They're already into the job, trying to look into the literature and the background, rates, so that we are well prepared when it comes. So the country is looking at different levels, and there are special people who are doing all these things right now, even right now. So this is occurring, to allay your anxiety. But also we need to be very strict in regulations. You know, we have to be, as you said, we don't have to rush into it. We must do everything. The vaccines have to be very safe. Otherwise, you know, they will one step forward and two step backwards. We don't want that way to happen.
There will be great damage to the vaccination program.
That damage, absolutely.
Vaccination.
So hesitancy, vaccine hesitancy is causing a lot of problems, and we need to be extra safe as far as vaccines are concerned. Absolutely true. And we need everybody to do that, you know, this part.
Dr. Shrestha, we would like to know your experience with the neurological complications in Nepal.
Well, I mean, febrile convulsive seizures is one of the commonest we see. And I think in my experience, that's one of the most commonest we have seen. Apart from the rare complications, you know, post, as you mentioned, post-encephalitis syndromes. We have seen a couple of them, but most common is, I mean, febrile seizures following DPT. As Madam said, we often forget the seizures following the MMR vaccines. So Nepal started MMR vaccine 5 years back, and second dose also we started around second year, around 5 years back. We switched to MMR, and of course second dose on 15 months. And that's another we have to keep in mind that, you know, febrile convulsion is also common following MMR, though it may be not in the first week, maybe in the second week. That's common. And of course, that, you know, the diphtheria antitoxin, we have seen some of the other complications, not neurological, obviously, because we have seen some of the diphtheria cases of late, like from 2016 to 18, we are around 15 cases of diphtheria. So, I mean, just to make you aware that diphtheria is coming up because of other similar conditions. So we have seen diphtheria cases now and then in our institute.
Even HHE is not that uncommon. The hypotonic hyperresponsive is also not that uncommon.
Exactly, and of course, we also use wholesale. We have not switched to escitalopram, and consulocrine and is that, you know, on consulocrine is also common in that context.
Some of our friends have reported apnea with the DPT vaccine, especially in preterm babies. Some of our colleagues here have seen apnea happening after the first dose of DPT vaccine in preterm babies.
Yeah, I mean, they are
revived very easily.
Yeah, right.
Okay, yeah.
That
could be HHE.
Of ROP also.
That is some kind of HHE.
HHE, yes.
Yes.
HHE is very often misdiagnosed as a pallor or, you know, as a seizure sometimes.
Even breath holding.
Breath holding. So it is not reported as HHE, but we know it could be HHE.
I think we should make people.
We have to sensitize the people for this, you know.
Exactly.
So you see, I mean, the countries, how you said flu vaccine, you know, in Australia, they could find out the febrile seizure rates are higher with one type of vaccine as compared to another vaccine, just by having the good data.
Exactly.
That calls for a good data, you know, background data.
Good epidemiological studies cannot be conducted until have a solid database.
Yes, absolutely.
Which unfortunately is lacking. So we can't say very categorically that this vaccine is causing this.
So for that, we need to all chip in, you know, we need to put in the data. Yeah.
The Indian Academy of Pediatrics is a very nice software, which is part of the IEP app, and in which you can very easily report the adverse effect to the IEP, and which they can later contribute.
But it was not giving a lot of information as far as the surveillance program is concerned.
It's in the early stages, but at least it's a beginning. Yeah. It's a beginning.
Some effort, yes, good.
Yeah, I agree with Professor Aniza, you know. We lack data, we hardly report. Unless we have a good report system, and nothing can put into data, you know. So I think we should encourage our fellow colleagues to report commonest to rarest, I mean, complication for neurology. Of course, it is mandatory reporting, but we hardly do it, you know. So unless we have a denominator, it's very hard to say the causality of the vaccine and so forth.
That was an excellent talk and excellent discussion. Now let's move on to the question answer session. So the first question that we have is, should we take informed consent from a child or the caregivers that the child may develop encephalopathy with each immunization visit?
Well, one has to be actually alert about situations in which neurological complications are more common. Taking informed consent from each and every child who comes for vaccination is not possible and also not desirable. But in those situations where you suspect that a neurological complication is likely, then you must discuss it with the parents beforehand. Because some of these children, for instance, if a child has already had a febrile seizure, or if there is history of febrile seizure in the family or in the siblings, in this situation, you should inform them, discuss them, and then only give. If you're using wholesale pertussis vaccine in a preterm baby, make them alert to the possibility that sometimes children may have this kind of problem. So informed consent in every child is not desirable, but in given situations, suppose you have a patient with Dravet syndrome and he's to be vaccinated, you have to be extra cautious. Matter of fact, even avoid some of these vaccines in such a situation because these children might land up with an encephalopathy. So a person-to-person discussion, face-to-face discussion with the parents is mandatory in such situation, and you should be aware. Matter of fact, this talk was basically an awareness drive to let people realize that some of these complications are possible and they should be alert in such situations. But informed consent for every child is not necessary.
Okay. Is it possible that encephalopathy occurs after first dose of DPT with third dose and first and second dose no complication? Probably there's a problem with the question, but is it possible to get encephalopathy after DPT occur first time with third dose and first and second dose there's no complication? Okay,
it
so
can
basically
happen with DPT, especially the pertussis component. There's no such thing that it will happen after first or second. With MMR, it is there. With MMR, it is febrile seizures are more common after first dose. They're not all that common. They are never seen after second dose. But DPT, it can happen anytime. So encephalopathy can develop. Also, it's an uncommon situation, but it can develop.
So I can also say that mostly when you give the third dose of DPT, that is the time when some of these epileptic syndromes will also present by themselves. For example, at around 4 or 5 months, many of them will not present at that time. So it could be a temporally association rather than anything else. Okay, encephalopathy has been actually now mostly refuted. They say it is genetic susceptibility to the Dravet's and to some channelopathies which are most likely incriminated.
Another thing that we must remember is that the incidence of disease at that particular point in time is also important to remember. Like ma'am discussed about SIDS. Now SIDS is very common in that frame, first 6 months of life. And pentavalent vaccines also given at the same time. So people might put that causality there and blame pentavalent for this, as like been rightly disproved in the Kerala experiment. So one must remember the baseline natural course of the disease when talking about such adverse effects and their interpretation.
How many of the adverse effects are causally related and not temporarily associated? Any ideas about that?
This
showed a slide. You had shown a slide where it was mostly the last slide that you showed CAP and I think you showed one slide. You could show it again.
Which one, ma'am?
There was a slide about febrile seizures, brachial neuritis, which are proven, which are.
You like to see that?
Yeah, you can show it to them. That is one which has especially to be reported also. It was towards the end.
The one on the febrile seizures, yeah.
No, sometimes it's nearly towards the end when you were summarizing. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
This
Well,
this slide is important because there are 2+ signs which says consistently shown in population studies, but not statistically significant, and 1+ is rare events, no population studies. These for measles vaccine, febrile seizures are common, but measles encephalitis is uncommon. For purchases, especially wholesale purchases, the febrile seizures are common, encephalopathy is uncommon. Paralytic poliomyelitis after oral polio vaccine is very uncommon, only 1 case per 2.5 million doses. Brachial neuritis is common with tetanus toxoid. And the surprising thing is, it can occur on the other side also, even when the injection was not given on that particular side. It only accounts for 15% cases. GBS can also occur with tetanus toxoid. And cerebralitis and cerebral ataxia can occur with varicella infection, varicella vaccine, also with the varicella infection also. So,
So I just want to add one thing. When we say common, we don't mean that common, common as in 1 to 10%. Even this is very, very 1 in 10,000 or 1 in that type.
yes,
Okay, so
it is common in relation to other conditions,
yes,
but not in
commoner,
comparison to the
not
population.
really common. Yes.
Not very common. One pediatrician probably will see only one encephalopathy with the vaccine in his entire practice career. But that for him, that one episode for the family and for him, his own self, is a disastrous. Because if a child develops, if your patient develops encephalopathy or encephalitis after your giving wholesale purchases vaccine, it is disastrous for you also.
Yeah.
okay. In the last slide, we saw about brachial neuritis. A user has asked, can you mention some vaccines causing brachial neuritis?
Actually,
Other than this one?
improper injection can cause neuritis in any patient, but it is much more common with the tetanus toxoid. Or any vaccine, any injection, if it's given in the vicinity of the ulnar nerve or in that area, it can be done. So one has to be cautious while there is specified directions for giving vaccine, especially in young children. Uh, the specifications are that you should always use the lateral aspect of the thigh for such vaccine. But even then, many people, especially in younger children, use the deltoid, and which situation you might cause damage to the nerve and give rise to brachial neuritis. So this
giving injection site, improperly administered injection can give rise to sciatic nerve injury, as well as this nerve injury in the upper limb. But brachial neuritis can occur without in the proper technique also.
yes.
Okay, so
Even
there is
without
a difference. One is by giving in the wrong place, you can get injury to the nerve, which is an error in immunization. This is product related to tetanus, which can occur on the other side also. So there is a difference here.
Okay. What are all the neurodegenerative diseases where DPT is contraindicated?
which DPT is contraindicated.
All of them.
As such, one has to be cautious in those children who are having seizure or who have propensity for developing seizures. Neurodegenerative disorders as such are no contraindication, but in certain situations where the child already has seizures or has tendency towards seizure, or he belongs to a sibship or kinship in which seizures have been observed in siblings, in these situations you should avoid.
Okay. What vaccines are to be avoided in case of epileptic encephalopathy?
Wholesale purchases vaccine is one definitely which to be avoided. MMR should be given with caution. Influenza also you should be alert to the possibility. Others are much less common. I think these three are one which you should be careful, especially purchases and MMR.
Treatment of acute encephalopathy after DPT.
I think it's the same like any other encephalopathy. It's all supportive management unless you have a specific. I think there's no specific treatment.
Okay. What vaccines are to be avoided in case of vanishing white matter disease?
White matter disease, as such, would not warrant avoiding any special vaccine unless it is a part and parcel of a syndrome where other lesions are also there. So, no specific contraindication for any vaccine in such a situation.
In a known case of Dravet syndrome, is vaccination overall a contraindication?
No. Only the pertussis vaccine should be avoided. Maybe the MMR vaccine also, but otherwise, this is not a contraindication for other vaccines. He has to be given other vaccines as per their schedule.
Any particular guidelines about the steroid use in case of epileptic encephalopathy and vaccination?
I think Dr. Neja would be in a better position to.
What is the question?
Use of steroids and maybe ACTH in case of epileptic encephalopathy and vaccination.
Well, actually, I don't think this epileptic encephalopathy after vaccination is a real, causal association with vaccination is doubtful.
No, do we withhold the vaccination while the steroids are ongoing?
So yeah, actually live vaccines should be withheld, and DPT, because if it is a progressive neurological, you will have to withhold it. Yeah. Okay. If you are giving steroids, you don't.
Yes. If COVID vaccine is available, how long should we wait to take it safely?
Huh?
For the
how long we should wait?
Yes.
It will depend. Again, whenever we are taking anything, we think of the risk versus benefit. So if the vaccine will come, I am not a member of task force. It will come for special group of people to start with. It will not be given to everybody. Maybe it will start with policemen, doctors, people who are in essential services. Then you have to see your risk, how it is the risk of getting COVID versus how you can prevent. So this will be taken, the decision will be taken by the people, intellectuals and scientists and the policy makers. I don't think we have come to that level as yet. We will cross that bridge when it comes. But right now, I think it is always done thinking about the risk versus benefit. And I'm sure our scientists are not, in a hurry. There is a strict regulations. There are not going to be any cutting of the procedures as far as vaccination is concerned. So whatever there might be in we are trying to rush through it to cut the, the undue delays should be cut so that for for ethical committees and all that we can hasten, but not for the other things, not for safety, not for efficacy. That is not going to be cut, let me assure you. There are people sitting there in the government. Nobody is going to do anything wrong.
We want to reach our destination fast, but we don't want an accident.
Yeah, accident on the way. Yes, right.
One thing I would like to add about the safety of the COVID vaccine. Right now, the vaccine is not available in majority of the countries, but the Chinese have the vaccine, and they've been trying it. Their military personnel. One study they have released last month, in which they have spoken about, I think, 2,000 cases of COVID vaccine, and they've reported that fever and the pain at the site of the injection were the two common complaints, two common adverse events reported with this vaccine. Otherwise, they've not reported any other significant problems with the COVID vaccine. This is a report from China which came last month.
So the last month, the thing is, it's not going to be over in 1 month. If you get another coronavirus second wave, you might get, exacerbation of the natural disease like we had with dengue. So people are keeping their, the safety details would be longer term. It can't be over 1 month. It might be over 6 months or even a year. So don't think that it is going to be so fast. I don't think so.
We have to
yeah, Dr. Kavita just tweet in the chat box. First person enrolled at Bharati Hospital, Pune for COVID vaccine today.
Yeah.
Okay. Covishield. Covishield. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Fortunately, we are the largest manufacturer of vaccines in the world. India is the largest manufacturer of the vaccine in the world. Both Serum Institute, Zydus, they have tremendous capacity. So luckily, we'll get the vaccine faster because we'll be manufacturing most of it.
Of course, I mean, you are in phase 3 trial, I guess.
So, but again, I will again request everybody, please report, even if you take COVID, whatever you have, you need to report. Otherwise, we'll never know which vaccine is safer than the other.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. We need to be alert for the safety.
Actually, problem is that majority of these vaccines are being built on a platform which has never been tried before. Like the Moderna vaccine is an RNA vaccine. And this vaccine, this kind of vaccine has never been used in clinical practice before. So we don't know what will happen. Other vaccines are on more established platforms like adenovirus platform. So they, at least the Oxford vaccine is on the adenovirus platform. So these platforms we are familiar with. These vaccines have been built up on this platform earlier, but some like RNA vaccines have never been tried before. So you have to be extra cautious in this situation.
So for extra cautious means being alert for any events which
Exactly.
are, and report and be aware. Yeah.
More vigilant, more vigilant.
Vigilant, yes.
Both patients and the doctors both.
Yes, exactly, absolutely.
There's a question about a policy. Is there a policy on compensation if serious complications occur, not only in case of COVID, but in vaccines in general?
So India doesn't have a compensation policy, but USA has a no-fault compensation policy. So there are countries which no-fault compensation. India, we have a public health system where the vaccines are given free of cost, and our it has not started it, but there are some countries which are even Thailand and all have started it. So maybe time will come, we will also have to have it. But right now we are not doing it.
It is not there.
Okay. How do we report vaccine-associated adverse effects in Nepal? Somebody has asked.
Nepal.
Nepal. Dr. Shrestha.
Yeah, well, we have the same system you have, We have the we have the protocol, the forms, which has been the WHO form, the standard form, which have been modified to our context, and the same form we use, and we have the same system as you have. You have to report.
Okay. Somebody has asked.
We are also AFI committee in the government, in the Ministry of Health, which does this, analysis of cost. I mean, the causality association, and we had few. I was one of the part in one of the DPT, deaths. I have the opportunity to visit one of the villages where death had occurred. So the parents claimed that it was with vaccine. So I was a member of the investigating in the AFI committee. So we have the same system.
Somebody has asked whether we can predict a seizure in case of a 6-week neurologically normal baby.
I think extremely difficult, but some clues can be obtained, like a history of febrile seizures in the family or other children in the family or even in the parents. This might give you a small clue to the possibility of that this child might have some seizures. Otherwise, if it's developmentally normal, if it's neurologically normal, then the chances are very minimal, very minimal.
Somebody has asked if we need to counsel the parents about the adverse effects of vaccination. How can we do it so that it does not affect the vaccination program?
I think you don't have to frighten them too much also. Even our physician, our pediatrician friends should also not be frightened too much, because it is there, but it's not to that extent that you should frighten everyone with telling them. If you tell them that your child might have seizures, might have encephalopathy after pertussis vaccine, then all be scared and they'll not come back. So you have to maintain a balance and a perspective. And in a given situation, if you feel that the risk, depending on the history and the family background, like if there is a bad obstetric history, if there's history of seizures in the family, if there's history of seizures in siblings, in that situation, you should make them cautious. But you shouldn't frighten them unnecessarily.
Okay. And another question, whether if patients complain of fever and excessive crying after meningococcal vaccine, the doctor has not found out a particular cause, if you could enlighten.
Meningococcal vaccines have not been known to cause this kind of situation, HHE kind of situation that you observe with the other vaccine, but not with the meningococcal. This might have been just a local site problem. Some children have an excessive response at the local site with any vaccine. Many people have sensitive skins, sensitive tissues, and it could be one of those situations where the local site situation was much more as compared to other children, and this child might have been crying excessively because of that. Meningococcal vaccine is not known to cause HHE-like situation or the hypotonic hypersensitive situation.
And any association of sudden deaths with OPV?
I didn't get you.
Sudden deaths and oral polio vaccine.
What was that? Oral polio vaccine.
Yeah. Any
With-
particular association between the two?
Oral polio vaccine and
Sudden death.
It's,
sudden death.
it's,
I
yeah.
don't think
What
I've
is it?
ever heard of that.
The oral polio and
As a cause of
Sudden
sudden
death.
infant death, I don't think it's a
see polio vaccine. The problem is you give so much of polio vaccine that any event which will happen would have some relationship to polio vaccine, especially
Exactly.
when you are giving in NIDs.
There's so many vaccines during the first year of life, especially
Yeah.
during the first 6 months of life, that any adverse event might be correlated with that in the parent's eye. Suppose he received oral polio vaccine 2 days back and there is SIDS after 2 days, they might relate it to that. So that is possible. That's just a temporal relationship. That's not an etiological relationship. So it's
But
not
it
a
is a
cause of
live. It is a live vaccine, so it can mimic the natural disease. So you can have polio-associated, poliomyelitis or aseptic meningitis. That you can think about, but not other
not
things.
SIDS, not SIDS.
Thanks everybody for the excellent discussion, and thank you, sir, Dr. Bhatia, for the amazing deliberation on the topic. It's of great implication to the pediatricians and for the people around. I think we had a great session. A lot of people are still listening, so definitely the interest is there. So now it's time to close. We'll meet you soon with another session.
Thank you
Thank
so
you all.
much. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. It's been a
Bye.
great session and it's been really wonderful having you on the panel. Really an
Thank you.
honor. Really an honor.
Bye.
Thank you,
Dr. Shrestha also,
Dr.
thank you so
Shrestha.
much. Really a
Okay,
pleasure.
Dr.
Great
Shrestha.
pleasure.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you all for giving me the opportunity to chair this session. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Bhatia.
all.
Thank you, Diptanshu, for wonderfully moderating.
Thank you.
And we hope to see Dr. Shrestha more often on the neurology panels.
Okay,
Thank
then
you so
it's
much,
my
ma'am.
pleasure having me here. Okay,
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much.
okay, good night.